Welcome everyone to our weekly HDI Local Chapters live stream show. Our show is brought to you by Robert Half Technology, who is a leading provider of technology professionals that are needed to build, deploy, and operate technology in this cloud and digital world. And today I'm really excited because it's a mini milestone for us. We are on our 20th episode. A little mini one for us, but still celebrating just the same. Today, our guest is Kirsten Peterson. Now, Kirsten has worked in IT at Oregon State University for 25 years. And in college, she studied, this is pretty cool, German and Linguistics. I'm lucky I can't even pronounce those. And has a passion for language and communications. Kirsten is an Oregon native and an OSU alum and serves on the board of the Oregon Southwest Washington HDI local chapter. Welcome to the show, Kirsten.
Hi.
So today we're going to talk about communications. Maybe we'll have you speak a little bit in German too. Maybe I was just kidding. That's up to you. But
that was not in the prep.
But for around communications, are we just naturals at communicating, or is there something more to opening your mouth and talking, kind of like I'm doing today? So Kirsten, that's some of the things that the audience will want to know, what I want to know. So let's get started. Most of us think that we know we know what it is. We know what effective communication is. But what is it really? I mean, you talked to me before in the pre-show about there being two parts of communication. Explain that.
Yeah, so, it's not just me saying words at you, right? I find that a lot of people, particularly early in their IT career, I'm sure this applies outside of IT as well, they get the sense that, if I've told somebody something or I've sent an email, then communication has happened. But it hasn't. You've just sent it out, but it's not necessarily been received. So the other part of the equation is somebody had to receive that message and understand it, and hopefully understand it in the way that you intended them to understand it and not in some other way, right? So, a classic sort of thing from a sysadmin, I probably said this once myself back in the day, is, I made a change and people were confused or upset or didn't know. And the sysadmin says, well, I sent an email, right? And of course the answer is always, well, nobody read it, or, well, it's not my fault they didn't read it, or it's not my fault they didn't understand it. Well, it is your fault, right? It's totally your fault. That's maybe being a little bit too strong about it, but there's more that you can do, right? The good news is that there is more to communication than just sending an email or just telling somebody something. And you can get better at it, and you can craft your communications in a way that they are received with more success.
I'm sorry, what did you say? No, I'm just kidding. I was paying attention. so when I'm communicating, should I expect that the other person in the group owns half of this responsibility? When I'm talking? I mean, you talked about responsibility, and it's not easy. So what's my expectations for my audience, whether it's a single person or a group or even this Twitch audience and YouTube audience?
Yeah, I think this is another common misconception that it's like a 50-50 thing, and it's not, right? If I'm communicating with you because there's something I want, right? I want you to understand something, or I need to inform you about something, or I need to request something, right? I'm initiating this, so the onus is on me to put the effort in to make this communication successful. And, of course, the other party has some responsibility, but I would say, as you're doing communications where the other party is maybe someone you don't know as well, or, if there's some kind of power dynamic, or if there's more people on the other side of that communication, your responsibility in that equation goes up and up and up, right? So if I'm sending an email to one or two people I know very well, I can be a little sloppy. If I'm sending an email to 4,000 customers, then most of the responsibility is on me in this equation. I should be expecting to do a lot of the heavy lifting. So, ideally, I would spend additional time and effort up front to craft a communication that will require very little effort of my audience, because I want to make it easy for them. And I don't want to cost them that time and effort to understand me. That's asking a lot, actually. It's
so
I think I mentioned. Go ahead.
Are you looking for perfection out of the person writing it? Then, I mean, is this so we're talking about I got to be perfect when I write this?
No, definitely not. No, I would say I will tell you, I have learned all of these things I'm saying right now the hard way by screwing up, literally. So I started off as a sysadmin, an email sysadmin, and I had a customer service role, though. So it was a little bit of both worlds, right? Some back office stuff, but also customer. But my customers were other IT people. But still, even so, I managed to confuse a lot of them. So I learned the hard way, what to communicate, when to communicate. Timing's really important. If people feel that you didn't give them enough time to mitigate, let's say you're asking them to make a change or be ready for a change or something's going to be down and you didn't give them enough time to address that, then you've cost them something, right? You've stressed them out. You've caused them a problem. So that's the kind of stuff that I learned the hard way not to do. But it's an iterative process, right? I certainly encourage people to learn from my mistakes. So
I need you to come talk to some people on my team. We have a communications group that I shared a little bit with you on the pre-show. Like, we have a communications team, and they have this process, and you have to put your it depends on your audience. If it's like just to a small group, it's one thing. But if you're sending out to customers, they want lead time and to be able to make sure it meets the expectations. And then my team goes, I don't understand it. Just send the damn thing out today. I mean, what's so hard about communication and just sending an email? And it's frustrating because I'm like caught in between them understanding where they're coming from. They just want to get their job done, and my communications team who really wants to make sure we meet the expectation, our heavy lift to make so it's easier for the person receiving that message.
Yeah, I have a little story about this actually. I definitely learned this one the hard way. We were going to add a new fee, and it was only going to affect 3 departments, and we were sort of doing it purposely to be punitive. And it's a long story.
It's okay. Just do it in 8 minutes.
I won't tell you that part. Yeah, I'm not going to tell you that part. But it was actually intended to be a bit punitive, and it was something that my boss wanted to do. I agreed, though, that it was the right idea. The problem came that I waited too long to tell people. And so when I did tell them about this new fee, one of the groups, it turned out they also charged fees to their users. So because I had not given them enough time to plan for that, they had not included my new fee in their new fees for the year. And there's like a period of time when you can do this in like March through April before the next fiscal year. And so, and I also made the mistake when I communicated this to them of not giving them an opportunity to negotiate with me. This is another thing that's kind of key. You have to be very careful sometimes to state things in a way, if you intend it to be negotiable, to indicate that it's negotiable, right? And there's some tricks to that, like you can say, let's talk about this, or, words to that effect that make it clear the conversation isn't like done, right? And I didn't do that. I was just like, here's this new fee, let's do it this time. And it was a lot, and it was a huge problem. And the director of this unit actually went to the president of the university to complain about me.
You're on the bad boy list.
One of only like 3 times that's happened in my career. So I definitely learned, and it was kind of funny. When I found out about it, I went into my boss's office and I was like, mea culpa. And the reason this happened is because I'm a big coward and I put this off, and I knew they were going to be upset.
You want to deliver bad news, right? I mean, delivering bad news isn't easy.
Yeah, and this was another lesson in bad news is better fast than slow, right? If you
pull the Band-Aid off is what you're saying?
Yeah, the longer you wait to give somebody news they're not going to like, it doesn't make it better. It makes it way worse. So I learned a lot in that encounter. We ended up, there's a happy ending to the story. We ended up getting together and putting the fee off to another year, and they ended up making the changes we wanted them to make so they didn't have to pay the fee anyway. So it all worked out. But yeah, it was a good lesson in give people time and, open the communication in a way that makes them feel like it's negotiable and they're not totally stuck, which I didn't do any of those things.
Yeah, no, and for our viewers, you and I both work in higher education, and it's a little bit weird of a model where we have different, like almost not quite siloed, but different organizations in the university, and we all work together, and sometimes you don't even know that your charge is included in somebody else's charge. It's included in another charge. And so, I totally understood that story clearly, because I'm a cost recovery unit where I'm at, and delivering and you're right, because when I have to deliver the news, we're raising our prices. You got to get a lot of lead time. People get in their budgets. But when we reduce the cost, and believe it or not, we've done that 1 or 2 times. They don't care. They're happy to celebrate. What do you mean? You gave us a 3-month notice. Can't you just do it now? It's so funny, right? One of the other things that you talked about a cost-benefit analysis, or like a cost equation, about time and energy. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I didn't make this up. I read it somewhere, but I really like it. If I send you an email, I'm spending some of your time, right? And I think a lot of people will appreciate this because email and other, now we get a lot of chats and stuff too. It feels like death by a thousand cuts, right? So every time you get a new email in your inbox, it's costing you some time to process that. And if it also requires a decision, then it costs you some brain energy to make a decision about that. And if you don't feel like dealing with it right now, then you have to put it off, and now it's hanging over your head like sort of Damocles. So it just, even something like a short email that I send to a colleague, I've taken money out of their pocket basically by doing that. And so it's really important to be cognizant of that and think about that when you're communicating, that I'm costing somebody something. And so if I write, War and Peace and send it to my boss, I mean, he's really good about this, actually. He'll just call me up and be like, just explain it to me.
Give me the executive summary.
He won't even read it. Yeah, and I actually appreciate that because I'm like, oh, I made it too long, didn't I? And he's like, yep. So, I mean, these are the kind of conversations we have. We're just very candid with each other, and this is how we get better at communication, too, is just by being honest.
Yeah,
so,
and I think, though, it also, we talked a little bit about this, you have to know your audience as well, because some people do like those longer emails. I know we get longer emails from the higher ups in our university, and it literally looks like a dissertation. It's just long, and I'm glazed over. And I think I told you the story about our university just gave us 3 bonus days for Memorial Day, thanking us during this COVID pandemic. And half the university didn't see it because it was in paragraph 3. Spent 2 paragraphs telling about how we're doing and what's going on. And and of course people glazed over. I'm a 0 inbox guy. I literally am very successful at 0 inbox. And I have to assess, oh, that is too darn long. That's from the top. I can read that later. Whoo, right over into a folder. Probably won't read it again, and I missed it. So I guess you do need to know your audience, especially where you and I work in higher ed. Some of our professors, they like reading. You didn't tell me enough. Tell me more. And then there's other people. So let's talk about that. You had a good story about this too. What's a response can be nope or sorry, later.
Yes. Oh, yeah, the too short email. So we had a customer, he sent a question to my colleague and me, and my colleague responded. My colleague was kind of famous for being a bit difficult. It was a communication problem. Anyway, he responded with a 3-character response, N-O period.
Simple.
And so I immediately got up and walked around the corner and said, hey, why are you mad at our customer? And he was like, I'm not mad. Why do you think I'm mad? And so I was like, well, you sent this really short email and it kind of sounded like you were PO'd. And he's like, oh, no, he asked this. And I realized that implies this, and that implies this, and that implies this. And he goes on for 8 steps, doing this mental calculus. And then he says, and I knew that wouldn't work. So I said no.
That was what was too short. He could have explained more, yeah.
And I was like, that's great, but you had to explain that to me. You need to explain it to him. You need to bring him along in your thinking. So, just saying no sounded like you were just being difficult and you didn't explain. He doesn't understand all the things you just told me. And so that's right, this theory of mind idea. People often assume that everyone understands what they understand. And this actually happens to us a lot at work too, where my boss will be in, 50 meetings where the same thing is discussed over and over again. And it's starting to happen to me too now. And you start to think everyone knows, right? And sometimes I'll mention something at the dinner table and my husband is just like, I have no idea what you're talking about. I'm like, well, we've talked about it a bunch of times. He's like, no, we haven't. And I'm like, oh, no, I've never actually mentioned that to you. This happens at work too, right? So we'll find out 2 years into some initiative that there's one person on the team who's like, what's that acronym? And we're all like,
yeah.
How did you miss that?
Yeah.
It's because he's literally never heard about it before.
Exactly. I was going to say, one of the points is I know most of our audience is in the technology field, but it doesn't matter if it's technology, healthcare, law. It's make sure that your audience understands the terminology you're using and not we talk about, oh, it's in the closet. Well, they're imagining this. You open up and there's this broom in the sink and it's, and really you're talking about networking gear, right? Servers and switches and routers, and it's hysterical.
Yes.
So Kirsten, we are down to less than a minute. Any last thing you want to leave with us before we call it a show?
Yeah, no, this is perfect, actually. I would encourage everyone to take a more goal-oriented approach to communications. So not just at work, in general. So be really clear about what your goal is when you're communicating with somebody, and even state your goal. It might sound a little dorky, but people know what you're trying to accomplish. They will help you achieve it, and then it can help mitigate a lot of these failure things that we've been discussing.
That's it. It's so true. Got a little bit on my screen there, but I just want to say thank you, Kirsten, for being our guest. I know, busy times out there, at Oregon State, and you've got a lot going on, so I really appreciate it, because I know, as we joked around, it's just the end of your workday over there. I'm getting ready to eat my late after dinner snack, but so thank you so much, and I invite everybody back next week, same time, and same channel, and for another exciting episode. Thank you, Kirsten, and everybody out there. Have a great evening.